Hi, I'm Charlotte and thank you for stopping by on my channel. So this video is a video I did not think I was going to do. It is a book haul. And one of the things I told myself when I started this channel was I don't think I'm going to do book hauls because I don't love watching book hauls. I think the main reason why is because I get excited about all the books someone is talking about, and then if they don't read them, I'm a little bit disappointed. So I'm gonna have to make an effort to read those books sooner than later. But what happened is a couple of weeks ago, I went to the French part of Switzerland in Lausanne. And the nice thing in Lausanne is people speak French. And so they have especially one that I like, very large French bookshop with mainly French books, which in Zurich is not the case. In Zurich there are a lot of bookshops, but there is only one bookshop where they sell books in French, and it is kind of a smaller section of the whole bookshop, which means I have only a kind of a reduced selection that I can browse, and otherwise I order books online. And it also has its perks. There are some things I really like about only having access to a small selection of books, and I will maybe talk about it another time. I'm planning on doing a video where I take you to the bookshops that I visit here usually, but it's not the same. It's not the same as just coming to a big city where everyone speaks French and having full floors full of books in French. And so I had told myself I was going to visit it, and I did. And then things got a little bit out of control, and before I knew it, I had bought 10 books. And then I looked at my selection and I thought, oh, this selection actually is nice because it will allow me to tell you about some types of literatures I'm interested in and some plans I have also with the channel. And so I'm just going to show them to you. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to show you my attempt at filming the landscape from the train when I was coming back, because it was a beautiful sunny January day in one of the nicest train stretches in Switzerland, and it was half successful, let's put it like this, but I will still show it to you, so expect kind of an impressionist view of a January Swiss train trip. This will be at the end. Now let's go through the books. So in total in Lausanne, I visited 3 bookshops. The main one that I talked about, and then 2 more kind of, that wasn't really planned, but one was a big kind of commercial bookshop that I don't love, but there was one book I really wanted to bring back, and I wanted to look at it beforehand, so I went there to see if they had it, and they had it, so I just got this one. And then on the next day I went to visit the new arts museum in Lausanne. They built like a modern building as the art museum for the region, and there was a small museum shop, and I love museum shops, and there was one novel that I have been wanting to buy since I've known it was out. So I also grabbed it, and at the same time it was like a nice souvenir from this trip to the museum, and also something that I know I will use or consume or read. It's a book. I like books. I use books, so I thought it was a good choice. All right, so let's get started. I've split the books into different categories. First, I will tell you about books of translated fiction which I got. Then I will tell you about some French-speaking literature in general, and then I will tell you about Swiss literature, which is most of what I bought. Warning, a lot of these books have not been translated to English. I tried, I looked, many haven't. I'm still going to tell you about them for a number of reasons which I will develop on, and I will let you know if they have been translated. And also one thing I will not speak about during the video, but if you speak German or Italian, many of these books have been translated to either German or Italian. So if you're interested, you can just look it up. Okay, let's start. So the first book I picked from translated literature is an essay, or maybe a memoir, by Yôko Ogawa, called in French Manuscrit zéro, which means it's manuscript zero, so quite easy to understand. And it is, I think, well, it is a memoir that she wrote, like as a journal in 2009. But I don't know if it's a real journal, or if it's partly fictionalized. I don't know if anyone knows. I'm not sure what it is about. I know it is about writing, her process of writing. And Yôko Ogawa is definitely an interesting author. And actually, funny story about Yôko Ogawa. When I arrived on BookTube, like a couple of years ago, everyone was talking about her. And then I thought, oh, I should check out her books because she sounds amazing. And then I looked out on a French bookshop website, actually the bookshop where I went, if they had any books by her. And then I realized I had already read 3 books that she had written, 2 short story collections and a novel. It's just that at that time I wasn't tracking my reading, so I didn't know the name of the author. But I knew I liked her. So when I found this one, I thought, oh, that will in any case be interesting. And yeah, I'm interested in discovering what type of a book it is. It's very intriguing, I think. And I don't know if I will know at the end if it's fictionalized or not, but in any case, it will be an interesting experience. Then I stumbled upon a bookseller's recommendation table, and there were a bunch of books on it. And this one caught my attention. It's a novel by an author called Al-Muqri. He's from Yemen. And this novel is called, well, the English translation would be The Handsome Jew. And as far as I've seen, it is set in 17th century Yemen, where the daughter of kind of a religious figure of Islam falls in love with a Jewish man, and what happens after that. And it talks about the interactions between different religions in 17th century Yemen. And I've never read anything by an author from Yemen, I think. I haven't read a lot of Arabic literature, but it's something I'm really interested in. I started looking into it and ordering some books last year because I realized I read books from quite a lot of parts of the world, but I haven't read that many books translated from Arabic. And Arabic is written and spoken in a version throughout all of the breadth of Africa, plus the Arabic Peninsula, which is a huge region. It's about twice as broad as Europe when you look at it on a map. So it's kind of a big part of the world to ignore when it comes to literature. And so when I saw this, I saw it was recommended, I saw it was written in Arabic, I just took it with me. It's also super short. I think it's maybe about 100 pages. So I'm gonna check it out. So this hasn't been translated to English, I think, but there are other books by this author which have been. So if you're interested in reading some Yemeni literature, maybe check him out. And then the third book I picked, well, actually I picked it, but I didn't pay for it. There was some kind of a promotion in the bookshop, and they were giving up a free book from a selection if you bought at least 2 paperbacks from them, which I did. I bought a lot more than 2. And so I kind of went through the selection, and the one that spoke to me is a novella by Alessandro Baricco, who is a 20th century Italian writer. I've never read anything by him, but I have heard of his books. I think some famous ones are Silk and I'm Not Scared. I have tried to look up if Novecento, I know Novecento, this book actually. I know the story because I saw a film many years ago. I could not figure out if it has or not been translated to English, so I just cannot tell you. But I know this is about a man who was born in 1900. That's what Novecento means. It means 900, or 1900. And he was born on a cruise ship, and then he never went on ground. He never went on solid ground. And he became a pianist, and he lives on the boat where he was born. Or maybe he changed boats at some point, I don't know, but it's about him. And it's a very short, again, it's a very short novella. And I thought, like if I have a couple of hours with nothing to do, that would be kind of a nice little novel to pick, a little novella to pick up. So I picked it up. All right, now let's move on to French literature. The first one I picked up is Le Voyage d'Octavio in English. This one has been translated to English. The title is Octavio's Travel by Miguel Bonnefoy. I already talked about this author in the video I made about books written in French that I think you should try if you haven't read them yet. He's an author of Chilean and Venezuelan heritage, who writes in a beautiful, luscious, academic French, really, really nice writing. And this is his first novel. It has been translated in a number of languages. And as far as I know, it is kind of maybe a coming-of-age story, of a quest story of a man through Venezuela. And it has maybe some surreal, fantastical, magical realism touches to it. I'm curious. I really like his writing. I also kind of love this cover, to be honest. So I picked it up, and we'll see how it goes. And then the next one was a cover pick, 100%. And this book is called Monsieur Dick, which translates to English as, well, I think the English translation, this also has been translated to English as, it's Mr. Dick or the 10th book, I think, something like that. Weird title. But basically it's about two scholars who are kind of fighting or kind of competing to discover the planned ending of Charles Dickens's last unfinished novel called, wait, I wrote it down because, called The Mystery of Edwin Drood, which was published, well, it wasn't published to an end, only the first half was published. And so it's kind of a literary, like, treasure hunt / mystery story with a rivalry between academics. I mean, I'm sure it's going to be fun and entertaining. And like, honestly, with a cover like this, I had to pick it up. And we'll see what happens. And then the last French literature book I picked is a very recent release from last autumn. And it is called Mon Mari, means my husband. And it is a novel by Maud Ventura, is the name of the author. It's her first novel. And actually there is a reason why I picked this book, and I have to go back a little bit. So what happened was, last January, as part of a project that I'm doing about classics, which I will talk to you about in a next video. I think it will even be the next video I'm planning to release. I read a novel by Patricia Highsmith. I read Deepwater by Patricia Highsmith. It was my first Patricia Highsmith, and I really loved it. And then in the fall, there was the release of Mrs. March by Virginia Fato. And I also picked it up and I read it. It was the last book I think that I read in 2021. And it is very Patricia Highsmith-y. Like the story reminds a lot of Patricia Highsmith's style, and I liked it. I got a little bit bored at some. I think something with the rhythm just didn't work for me in the last like third of the book. I liked it. I liked the story. I thought it was very kind of the style was fun, and you wanted to know what was going to happen, and it was sometimes really unsettling. And the way this book brings in the weirdest details and anecdotes, and yet the narrator talks about them as if they were completely normal. It's kind of chilling. So I like this aspect of it. And in Mrs. March, what happens is the narrator doesn't have a name, and she always refers to her husband as, well, I mean, her name is Mrs. March. She talks about herself as Mrs. March, or the narrator talks about her as Mrs. March. It's a third-person novel, but it's definitely from the perspective of her, she's the protagonist. And then she talks about her husband as Mr. March, although I think we know his name. But there is this kind of attachment to the different roles of the people and how it affects the way they behave. And for her, being Mrs. March is a very important factor in who she is, and maybe more precisely, who she wants or aspires to be. And there is kind of a dichotomy between who she aspires to be and her inner thoughts and psyche. And so the reason why this pushed me to buy this third novel is because Mon Mari, already the cover, you know, there is something about it, like the 50s feeling, there is something about it. Mon Mari is, so it means my husband. And as far as I know in that book, the protagonist, it's a first-person narrative. I also don't think we know her name. And she refers to her husband as my husband. I don't think we know the name. So there is also this kind of focus put on the different roles. And as far as I know, it is also kind of a dark humor novel story. I don't know if it goes into the thriller the same way Mrs. March does or not, but apparently she kind of compulsively is right? Writes down all of his faults in like a notebook, and she decides to make him pay for them in some way. I don't know what it's going to be like, but he was giving me the same vibes. And also kind of Patricia Highsmith-y vibes. I'm saying vibes apparently, so also some Patricia Highsmith-y vibes. And I want to know what it's like. I want to know what it's about. It came out almost at the same time in a different language. And yeah, I'm intrigued. And I think it's going to be entertaining anyways. And maybe I will do then maybe a comparison video or something like that. We'll see. And it was a success of last fall, so maybe it will be. Maybe this one will be translated to English at some point. I'll keep an eye on that. Okay, and those were all the books in French that I got. So 3, huh? Now we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 books in total. And now the last 5 are Swiss literature. And the reason why I bought so much is one, I'm interested in it. As a Swiss person, I think it's kind of interesting to learn more about the literature in your own country. And I am planning long term to do a video, or maybe even a video series on it, and to discuss a little bit what it is, if there is a Swiss literature at all, and then who are figures of literature who have some kind of attachment to Switzerland, and how it is contextualized in the country's history or something like this. Like, it's still a bit nebulous how I want to do it, but it's something I've been thinking about a lot, and I think I will do it at some point. And I have read some Swiss literature, but it's always good to read more, and I want to get kind of a broader image. I also want to read more Swiss German literature, which actually I only bought one book translated from German in this haul, but I have some others at home. I have a plan, but I'm building up my library, and I have to read them and kind of get through it. is planned, but that's why I bought so much. And so the first one that I got is, it's a big one, it's very floppy, look at that, nice. And it is called, well, the English translation is The People of Seldwyla, and the author is called Gottfried Keller, and he is a Swiss Roman author. He was, because he lived in the 19th century, kind of throughout it. I think he was born in 1809 and he died in around 1890, so he saw the whole 19th century. And he was kind of a figure of German-speaking literature at that time. Apparently Nietzsche was kind of a fan, so interesting. And he wrote realistic fiction, which, you know, is in line with, it was definitely a literature trend in the 19th century. And this is, The People of Seldwyla is actually a series of 10 novellas set in a fictional town in Switzerland. And it is realistic fiction, but apparently it also has aspects of kind of it discusses politic ideas, and it's at least it has some humor in it, some irony, maybe even some satire. I don't know a lot about it. I haven't read it yet. It's very big, but I think I can kind of chop it up. And I'm very curious. I'm very curious to read about it. It came out in 1856. And this is the first time, so in 2020, I think, when this came out, or maybe even 2021. And it was the first time that all of his novellas were translated, were put together in French. And I've looked it up, and I think in English there was a translation of some of them, but it came out in the 1930s. And since then, I don't know. Like, I couldn't find anything. So it seems like it's someone who has kind of has gone a bit forgotten. But I would be very curious to read to read his novellas and to see how it goes into the general context of a Swiss literature. After this, I finally got the first novel by Élisa Dusapin. I talked about her second novel in my last wrap-up. This is Winter in Sokcho. It is the novel that just won the National Book Award for Translated Fiction in 2021. I really like her style. I will read it. As far as I know, it is about a young woman who works in a small hotel in Korea. And then a French man who is illustrator of graphic novels comes in, and something happens between them. I'm sure it will be interesting. I'm sure it will be well written. As I mentioned in my last wrap up, she was born from a French father and a South Korean mother, but she grew up in large part in Switzerland, and she also went to a Swiss school for creative writing, from which kind of an interesting new generation of Swiss authors has come out, and that's why I'm interested at her book from this kind of Swiss literature, perspective. I think I'm gonna read this soon. Maybe in the summer would be nice. Leave a few months between the different books, but read it soon enough. And then I got another book by one of these authors from the Swiss Institute of Creative Literature, Creative Writing. It's called Schumacher, however you want to pronounce it. And the author is Romain Buffat. Actually, fun fact, I know this person. I know this guy because we are the same age and we grew up very close to each other. So we went to the same school. And so I know who he is. And my sister knows him well. And the year that this came out, I think this came out in 2018. She gave this book to a bunch of people for Christmas, but she didn't give me one. And so when I saw it in Lausanne, I thought, oh, this is now the time to get it and read it and see what it's about. what I know about this book is that it is about, I think it is about someone who exists. It's based on someone who existed, even probably maybe someone in Romain Buffa's family. A man who came from the US and who came to a military base in France. He was a US Air Force pilot, and who then met a woman there, a woman called Khaled. And then the author kind of imagined what his life must have been like. Something like this. I'm curious about it. I love family stories. I love kind of speculation about existing figures. All of this speaks to me. And again, it's kind of a tiny book. So I think like on one afternoon it could be read. And I'm looking forward to read it. I'm looking forward to see what his style is. And then no, it's not the last one. After this, I got something I don't usually read, and it is poetry. It is poetry by an author called Gustave Roux. Okay, so this is the end, and the light is not good anymore, but I'm doing a retake of this book because I feel like the first one was so rambly. The book that I got is a poetry collection by a Swiss author called Gustave Roux, French-Swiss. And I have been interested in reading his poems for a while because a few years ago I read another novel by a contemporary Swiss writer called Là-bas où est un mois d'automne, which translates to Over there, August is already a fall month, a month in autumn, by an author called Bruno Pellegrino. And this novel talks about Gustave Roux and his sister Madeleine. They were siblings, they never married, and they lived their whole life in the house where they were born in a very small town in French-speaking Switzerland in the countryside, not very far from where I was born and grew up. And so Gustave Roux, he was born in very early 20th century, or just before the beginning of the 20th century, and he was a poet and a writer and also a translator and an editor. I think he was a translator. And he wrote lots of poetry about the place around where he lived, about the nature and about the countryside and about farmers and farm work and the workers around him. And he was also a photographer. This book is a photograph that, like the cover is a photograph that he took. And an interesting thing to know, he took lots of photographs of nature, but he also took photographs of people who lived in his town. And those were farmers, men that he knew, and he made them pose. And he made them often take their shirts off. And I mean, Gustavo, he was a gay man. And there is definitely something very queer about those pictures. I mean, it's not explicit, but I mean, for the 1950s, deeply religious and conservative countryside of rural Switzerland, I can tell you that feels very like unusual or groundbreaking, or I don't know how to express it correctly in English. And I'm going to try and find an example of that. Oh yeah, here is one, for example. So that would be him walking around in the countryside and then meeting, wait, let me do that so maybe it focuses on it, meeting some man that he knew from his town, and I would put some better pictures here, and then making pictures of him. And there have been a couple of documentaries about him and his relationship with the people in the town, and I think it's very fascinating. And in this novel that I talked about, in this one, it talks a little bit about this, but it speaks a lot about his writing, and there are extracts of it, and it's so beautiful and interesting. And ever since then, I've wanted to read something by Gustave Roux, and it was really hard to find like recent books, recent publication of his work until that book came out. But since then, a lot more has come out. And so this one, it's two short, poetic works, collections. Some are in verse, some are more like prose, more like vignettes. And I'm really looking forward to read them. The next book I pick is a book by author Daniel Deroulet called 10 Little Anarchists. It's a historical novel that may be based on true events. At least it is partially based on true events. And it is about 10 women from a region of Switzerland that was particularly poor, especially in the 19th century. It was a manufacturing region in the Jura Mountains, where kind of one of the founding congresses of anarchism took place in the late 19th century. And so, anarchy anarchism, socialism, communism were big political movements in Switzerland in the 19th century. I don't think you might necessarily expect it when you look at Switzerland now, but there is a reason for this. And that's why I want to make those videos about Swiss literature, because I think there are lots of things to say. Anyways, so it's about 10 women who are factory workers in the Jura Mountains who hear about anarchism and decide to go together on a trip to Latin America to build or to create an anarchist commune. I mean, that sounds fascinating. It got good reviews when it came out. It came out in 2018. And another interesting thing about this book is it's written in the first person plural, like we, in the we form. So that will be interesting, I think. Again, super short. So I'm looking forward to try it. Okay, so that was all for the first bookshop. And then my battery died, and so I had to stop filming for a while and start again. And now I'm kind of fighting against daylight, but it is good because I see I've already filmed a long time because I've found out I'm very chatty in front of a camera. So now I can kind of wrap it up quickly, hopefully. Just 2 more books to go. First one is a book I've wanted to have for a while because I like the author's other novels. Actually, she's I guess you'd call her a YA author, although she wrote before, I think, YA became a thing. And somehow in this French bookshop that I went, they still separate YA literature from literature for teenagers. I'm not sure I understand the difference. Anyways, I read her when I was a teenager, her first book series called Four Sisters, which I think has come out in some version in English, but I think as a graphic novel. And then she wrote a new series called Broadway Limited. The author's name is Malika Ferjuk. And it is, she has a weird style. Very, very, I don't know if it's even called flowery. She uses strange metaphors and it's a bit surreal, and it's super quirky, very quirky style. But I think it's a perfect, like, kind of an entertaining, easy read. And this series, this is the first volume, and it is about a young man, a young French man, or he's not even a man, he's a young boy. He's 16 years old and he arrived in New York. And his name is Jocelyn, but actually it's written like the English girl's name, Jocelyn. So he gets mistakenly admitted into a pension for young women. And because he's kind and he can play the piano, they keep him. And so he becomes friends with all of these American girls in the entertainment showbiz world of New York in the 1940s. And it's a lot of fun. I started it kind of as a secondary read. I'm kind of, I don't know, like not yet halfway through, like 200 pages in or 175 pages in. And I'm having a great time. I don't think it would translate that good to English. It hasn't been, because it is definitely written for people who are not from the US, and even people who don't really have a broad culture of the English-speaking cultural world. And it's also YA, so maybe that's why it's sometimes very, very obvious. But I'm still having a good time. I love her characterizations. Usually it's very fun. And it's so quirky. Oh my god, sometimes you don't think it's gonna work. She makes the weirdest metaphors. Like last night I read something about a young girl whose eyes shine like a young salmon's back. I mean, you have to give her props for thinking about it. But it's like the whole, you have 3 like this per page, you know. But it's fun. I'm looking forward to see how it goes. And I think reading like 1 a year, or maybe more, like when I need some kind of easier read, it's gonna be perfect. And I really, really like this cover. I think it's very nice. And it's like the whole book is decorated like that. So kind of nice. And then the last book, finally, is the one I got at the Museum of Art. And it is a novel by Félix. It's also a novella by Félix Vallotton, who is a painter, a 19th century painter. And I think he is my favorite painter. He's kind of he does very weird paintings. I don't know how they're very eerie and mysterious, with beautiful use of colors. And he also was one of the big figures in woodcuts. I mean, that's a bit, you know, it's very niche. But I'm gonna show you some pictures. I'm gonna show you pictures of his landscapes, which are so eerie and strange, and of his woodcuts, which are like, they have some, it's like graphic, they feel like graphic design. They're beautiful. And he wrote also 1 novel that was only published after his death. And it's called The Murderer's Life. And I think it's kind of a fictionalized, it's just a young man kills himself, and then he leaves a manuscript in which he talks about his life and what brought him to his death. And apparently his whole life, he has been causing deathly accidents to people around him. And that's what the book is about. And it's supposed to be very dark and very ironic and kind of satirical. And he himself drew some made some illustrations from it with woodcuts. And I'm gonna try and find a nice one to show you. There are several. Okay, so here are some of his woodcuts. And I think they use the darkness very dramatically. Really love them. And now that was all. It's been chatty. And as promised, so that was my trip to Lausanne in books. And when I came back, it was such a beautiful day. So I said, oh, I'm gonna, I've decided I want to blog, so I'm gonna make pictures of the beautiful landscape. And I tried, and it was not 100% successful, but I still put together a little montage, and I hope you will enjoy it. So I hope this was somehow interesting for you, even if maybe a lot of these books cannot be directly found in English, but maybe you will find something that inspires you, maybe it reminds you of some other authors. I would be happy if you let me know about them in the comments. And I'm looking forward to see you soon, and I will let you with the last mini montage. Thank you and goodbye.